Hello and welcome to this drawing tutorial on the cylinder. This is part of my General Models series where I'm trying to demonstrate, explain how to have a foundational knowledge of the three main three-dimensional structural forms. That can be thought of when drawing pretty much anything. This is going to be I'm going to be doing the cylinder for this one. Just to clarify, this is not a specific cylinder. This happens to be a situation where we're looking down so we can see the top of the cylinder. It also happens to be that the light is coming from the left side, so the shading and light pattern will relate to something like this. So let's get going. And basically having this, being able to think of this without having to think about it, being able to draw that basically in your sleep, having this idea confidently in your mind's eye and your drawing hand is going to be extremely helpful. When I'm constructing a cylinder, this basic general idea of what a cylinder is going to be. First, I'm going to draw a center axis, especially for cylindrical items that are symmetrical. The center axis idea is critical. Next, I'm going to indicate where the top is, as well as where the bottom is. These lines get a little bit unclear because they can sort of represent the very top of an ellipse, or they can represent the long axis of the ellipse. That is what the top of the cylinder will appear, but I'm trying to not get too much lost in that. I'm mostly just trying to create some construction lines that are going to help me understand the basics of a general, no-nonsense cylinder. So I like to do these threes. 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to draw the sides now. 1, 2, 3. I want to make sure that the distance between this is equal to the distance of that. Let me clean things up a little bit to have it be clearer. Normally I wouldn't be drawing these lines quite this dark, so I'm going to knock them back a little bit. So in the general model that I'm creating, I'm going to be imagining looking down so that I can see the top of the cylinder. So this shape that's called an ellipse, which can be a tricky one to draw, is what I will see at the top. What I will see at the bottom is the front edge of the ellipse and a couple really important things. Whichever ellipse is further away from you will appear more circular. I'm looking down and this one is closer to me. This ellipse will appear relatively flatter this way than the ellipse at the bottom. A helpful way of doing that is to make sure that you first of all learn how to draw an ellipse, but which clearly I could is to draw through and imagine that both the front of this ellipse as well as lightly imagining the backside. This can sort of seem counterintuitive oftentimes when you're looking down at a cylinder, because oftentimes when you're looking down at a cylinder like a coffee cup, for example, because your brain sort of knows that the cylinder is sitting on a table or sitting on something flat, standing on something flat, it starts telling your hand just to make sure to draw flat. Well, that's one of the theories anyways. So you'll tend to draw this cylinder much flatter than this one. And in actuality, it will appear more circular. So that's one thing to be careful of. So let me see, I've got my 1, 2, 3, center line, top and bottom. You can see for this particular example, I seem to be going with the long axis of the ellipse as opposed to thinking of the bottom as down here, which I really, I was going to say I really hope is in frame. For the sides, another important thing to remember, because of perspective and the fact that this part of the cylinder is farther away from the eye than this part of the cylinder, that lines that appear parallel will also appear to slightly converge. So the edges here are not going to be perfectly perpendicular. I'm trying to angle them in ever so slightly. Angle them towards this center axis that's getting further away from me down that way. So if I was to exaggerate it, it would be like this. I'm not going to exaggerate it, but I'm just going to try to have a very subtle effect. Once again, in my general concept, general model of drawing a cylinder, I want to know that the end of the cylinder that's further away from me both has a more circular ellipse and will also appear that the sides of that cylinder are slightly angling towards it. And that will be true in different scenarios, so that's really helpful to know. Lastly, I'm going to talk a little bit about shading for the cylinder. I'm imagining my general model as having a light coming from the left side here. So what I'm going to do is just make sure that in my concept of what I would expect a cylinder to look like, is that there will be a gradual darkening as this cylinder turns away from the light source. Now there's a whole bunch of really fun and sometimes confusing, but mostly fun situations and specifics about lighting and shading when it comes to anything, and the cylinder is no exception. Depending on how strong the light source is, and depending on just how shiny the cylindrical item is, things will appear a little bit different. There may be a very distinct white stripe of a highlight. There may be a very distinct area that's known as the core shadow, which involves reflected light. But the main idea that I want to know, and I encourage you to be comfortable with, is just building up a situation where I gradually get darker. It's a graduated shading from the point where the light can't hit the cylinder as it's turning away, and will get gradually darker. Building up, having that idea is going to be very helpful. One of the things that I enjoy in drawings, and I know a lot of other people do, is having a wide range of values, from lights to darks. And while the specifics of the cylinder that you're drawing won't be exactly like this general model, they will follow this idea. And knowing the primary pattern of how lighting and shadows and shading is going to work for a cylinder, as well as the other items, is going to greatly help you regardless of what situation you're coming into and drawing. Erase a little bit up here as well. There's one more thing I want to talk about up at the top. I'm blending a lot with my finger just to try to get that to be sort of a gradual blend. This is all sort of quick and no nonsense. I will say that I also like to sort of have some indication over on the other edge. I'm not going to talk about that too much. But I am going to come back in and make this even more dramatic, the gradation from the light to dark. Also maybe try to clean it up just a little bit. Do a little bit across other direction. Now the reflected light of a specific situation will, like I said, be something to study and understand. But for now, juggling just these things, my juggling analogy, is plenty to juggle. So I'm going to make this side really dark. Kind of fun. Clean up a couple things here. The other main thing that I like to think about when I'm thinking of my general model of a cylinder is that there is going to be some sort of gradation depending on the light source. On this top plane as well. Often it will be much more subtle. But having that in mind is going to help being able to differentiate this front part from this top part. Anytime there's a different plane, you want to have some kind of different value so that it's clear and not ambiguous, just which plane is which and where light is hitting, and the underlying three-dimensional structure of whatever it is you happen to be drawing. So I could fuss with that a lot and that would be fun, but this is my general model for a cylinder. One, two, three. 1, 2, 3. If you can do that sort of quickly and just kind of get comfortable with the basics of doing a cylinder like this, you're going to be that much further along in your drawing artistic journey. Okay, go try it. Have fun.